Welcome to Buzz is Building with Joel Smith. Every Wednesday, Joel joins us for the last block of the show to provide 5 players with some buzz that you need to keep an eye on heading into Week 12. Joel, what's going on, buddy?
I'm doing all right. Working in football for a living, so I'm happy.
Hey, it's better than having a real job. That's what I always say. It's better than working on the
That's
railroad.
true.
So there's a lot worse that we could be doing out there. We've got 5 players to talk about here tonight, starting with Jackson Dart, quarterback of the New York Giants.
I'm excited. Yeah, Dart, I wrote a couple weeks ago about just how good his rushing has been. Phenomenal, really. If we look past at the last 4 years, the percent of fantasy points from rushing for a quarterback. Justin Fields is the top 2. Last year, Jalen Hurts at number 3, 46%. Dart is at 45% of his fantasy points coming from rushing. But then he had the injury, the concussion, and on top of that, the coach firing. So that's what makes me a little bit nervous because at the end of last year, like what we saw with Drake May, they weren't designing any runs for him at all. And this year, Dart, as you just saw, like so much of his production has come on the ground. Before the bye week, he had 2 times as many red zone design carries as any other quarterback since he started. That the design rate in terms of his rushing, #1 in the NFL for quarterbacks. So much is relying on that. And that's a little bit of the worry now is with the new coaching staff and then being 2-9, him coming off an injury. Do they hold back on that a little bit? Because in terms of his fantasy passing points, it's the 31st best.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I feel like nobody wants to talk about this because everybody likes Jackson Dart, and obviously he's been such an awesome answer as a fantasy quarterback. Like I popped in to do the rankings this week, and consensus-wise, he's immediately right back up there to being a quarterback 1. And I get it. It's not like we're flush with a bunch of options right now. In fact, we've got some really questionable options at quarterback at this point, but with Dart, so much of his production came from the rushing, as you just highlighted here. And I look at that receiver room right now. This is the reason, Joel, I didn't want to really get excited about the Jameis Winston experience last week. I'm like, okay, he's going to be doing the Jameis Winston stuff, throwing the football downfield. Who's he throwing it to? He threw it to freaking Jalen Hyatt, who lost him the game at the end of it, just selling him on that corner route. Like, that's the Giants receiver core. It's kind of difficult if they dial back Dart as a rusher. Pretty difficult to get excited about this passing offense right now.
Yeah, totally. And this started off as a positive thing for me when I was originally going to do it. And then after the coach firing that last week over the bye, then it kind of became a negative because you're like, oh no, well, what if that #1 usage dips a little bit? Because right now I wouldn't say like it's a sell or a panic. It's more like, hey, check the box score, check his rushing throughout the game if you're watching it, see if they're still using him the same way this weekend.
Yeah, and it's mostly just the design stuff around the end zone. That's what we need. Obviously, we just need him scoring touchdowns. What is he scoring? 7 rushing touchdowns so far. So we don't
Basically
need him
every
taking
game.
off and being, basically every game. We don't need him being overly aggressive in the open field. This defense, though, in Detroit this week is definitely going to be tough. That Lions defense is really underrated and a really tough group. Good linebackers as well, so they should be able to keep him in check. Definitely a really critical game to watch. You won't think like, oh, what? Giants against the Lions, really critical to watch. But from a fantasy standpoint, really critical to see how Dart is used and how he plays in this game. I like you calling this one out. I also like your second player here, Kenneth Walker, running back, Seattle Seahawks. Very curious to hear what you have to say about this one.
I know there's been a little bit of buzz. Mike McDonald kind of teasing like, hey, we should maybe get him a little bit more involved. He has been a little bit more involved already in some key areas. That's what I want to talk about. I know you made a joke on Twitter this week about him finally getting that goal line carry, but when they've both been active before the bye week, the goal line split was 9 carries for Charbonnet, 1 for Walker. And it's a very valuable spot to be in the Seattle offense. They have the 4th most points at the goal line for running backs. It's just all going to Charbonnet. But ever since that bye, the last 3 games, it's been 4-1. So that's flipped a little bit. Maybe not sticking 100%, but it's promising. And then in terms of the routes, the other thing, they don't really throw to running backs too much, but he bumped up from a 38% of the Seattle running back routes to now 56%. So a little bit better there. If it's just like a few points per game difference, that could be really big, going from like on the bench to like a flyer flex to now like that lower end RB2 if it can get up to like 13 or 14 points per game.
So I'm going to just lay out my theory on this whole Kenneth Walker thing to you, and you tell me if this passes the sniff test. Because to me, Joel, I was kind of a draft centrist when it came to Walker and Charbonnet. There is usually like a pro Walker camp and a pro Charbonnet camp. I was like, I kind of come down in the middle. I think both these guys are good picks, and I want to be invested in this run game. That was not a good take. Being invested in this run game has actually been bad. It has not been a good run game this year. But I'm not like a Walker or Charbonnet guy. Again, I'm kind of a centrist here. And one of my theories, though, was that they were going to ease Kenneth Walker into the season. That's, to me, why Charbonnet has been used so much, because Walker doesn't like he's not made it through a full season in the NFL yet. This is the healthiest he's been so far this year, and I think it's because of the less usage that he's gotten. But now it's time to go win games. It's time to go secure your playoff seeding. It's time for the biggest games of the year. Like, to me, and this is on record. I said it on 301. I've said it on this show before. I can just see like a December to remember sort of run here for Kenneth Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why that coach speak that you're highlighting sort of stood out to me this week. So we'll see what happens, but it at least does that pass the sniff test to you at all?
Yeah, I would say that's why I like use the buy specifically. I can't get too excited. I was totally like a Walker homeboy in terms of the off season. So loved him this season. It's not been super positive, obviously, but the volume, they run it a ton. The volume is there in terms of like that team, at least in the percent of how much they're running it. There are just a couple different things missing, but if there's a couple different changes, it goes from like that more of a negative situation, just running between the 20s and it doesn't really mean much, to maybe a little bit more receiving and goal line work that can really set them over the top and actually be usable.
Next 3 weeks, pretty good matchups here. Titans, Vikings, Falcons. So Walker, if he's going to get an expanded role, he has a chance to really start building that momentum towards the December to remember here for Kenneth Walker. So again, this is kind of just like my fan fiction that I've built out in my head that I see this happening, and we'll just have to track if this is real or not. But I do like you bringing up that coach speak. We'll see if he can continue to get that expanded role. Let's get to your third player here. Buzz is building about Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, Joel. I feel like panic and sadness and weeping is building about this situation.
That might be a better way to put it. Buzz as in news, not maybe buzz as in positive news. News in general, though, with Michael Penix getting injured yet again, ACL yet again. How does it look for Drake London and Bijan Robinson? The short answer is not nearly as good. If we're looking at the points per game for London these last 2 seasons, it's about 50-50 in terms of his games with Penix and with Cousins. And in those games, 16.9 points per game with Penix, down to 12.4 in half PPR with Cousins. The yards per route takes a big dip. The air yards, about 40 yards less per game, just less of a downfield attack, especially when it comes to London.
Yeah. I really worry Drake London's just not going to play again this season either, because I just wonder how quickly things can spiral for this Falcons team. He's obviously dealing with the PCL injury, and I just think Kirk is pretty close to done at this point, and that really worries me from a London perspective. Bijan, obviously, it's going to take some of the teeth out of the run game because he doesn't move as much. I am curious if you have any optimism left for Darnell Mooney or even like a Kyle Pitts type, who did actually get a lot of targets last time Kirk Cousins started.
Maybe a little bit for Pitts, but not so in terms of like actually starting him weekly or being a top 10 guy. Like, he might be like that flyer tight end you can use just because of that volume. It hasn't been bad even with Penix sometimes. Mooney, not so much, just because I don't really trust Cousins too much in this offense. Just is the same situation that we've seen before. So I feel like a couple of these quarterbacks that are the veteran backups, like a Joe Flacco, like a Brissett, if we look at just the numbers, they weren't supposed to be good. And I kind of fell for that with Flacco. Like, look at the Browns, and he moves over to a different situation, and it sparks something. Brissett, if you looked at the last time he was starting, it was really bad. But then when he goes to the Cardinals, suddenly he's a top 12 quarterback every single week somehow. And it's the same situation for Kirk Cousins. So I feel like that's a little bit like we kind of maybe know what's going to happen a little bit more, because we've seen him both in this offense this year, but also last year, and it hasn't necessarily been good.
Yeah, I'm going to say 2 decent matchups here, Saints, Jets, the next 2 weeks, but he had pretty much the spot of all spots the last time he got to start, did Kirk Cousins against the Miami Dolphins, and we all know how that went for both him and Darnell Mooney, who we're showing on the screen here right now. Let's get to your 4th player this week, Ricky Pearsall, San Francisco 49ers wide receiver.
Yeah, I feel like I get he just had 0 points. But even before that point, I feel like there was a low amount of hype on Ricky Pearsall, which I was kind of surprised with how he started the season. Those first 3 games, he didn't have a touchdown, so he's wide receiver 16. If you just go off the receiving points that weren't touchdowns, which, eventually will happen, he can score those. It was the wide receiver 6. So he came back last week. Shanahan talked about how he's not really a full go, more so after the game or at halftime. But he still
Of
ran all
course.
the routes. So still with Jennings, yeah. Still with Jennings and Kittle up there, ran all the routes. But he is that downfield receiver. He's a top 5 guy in terms of those deep targets per game, but none of the screens, that sort of thing. So maybe a little bit more volatile. But I went back and looked, and he had a couple opportunities there. Like Purdy was late to him in the goal line when he could have had a touchdown. There was another one where he was open deep for a touchdown, and Purdy was just under pressure. A couple spots like that where I could see it being a different day than what it was.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a big Pearsall guy, so any Pearsall hype on the internet, it was coming from me. Don't know why I wasn't there in other circles, but yeah, I think this last game you could sort of see this coming, right? Where he's a full go, he's out there from a full snaps perspective, but they didn't even know for sure he was going to play until later in the week, so he wasn't really installed into the game plan. And I mean, you tell me if you saw the same thing, but to me, when I went back and watched Pearsall, it's a lot of he's clearing space for other people, which,
Yes,
in this
100%.
game against the Cardinals, you can do that because they blew out the Cardinals. That was not a competitive game. We'll see what it looks like against Carolina in Week 12 on Monday Night Football, but I certainly think that looks like a much better spot for Ricky Pearsall. He's likely going to move around a little bit more too. He's pretty much just tethered to the outside in this game, so I know it was a disappointing outing last week, but it sounds like, Joel, we're kind of saying, hey, Ricky Pearsall, let's be patient and see what happens this week.
Yeah, totally. And it's not the greatest matchup in the world, but I just trust this offense. And fantasy, when you're talking dynasty, you want those guys in the good offenses long term. And long term, this San Francisco offense has been like this. They've been amazing in terms of fantasy points. This year, you wouldn't think about it because you think about who they've been throwing to. Kittle for half a season, CMC, Jennings. They have the 3rd most receiving fantasy points on the year, with Purdy being out half the season too. So they're still up there in a year where they haven't really had anybody. So if you can get a guy that's the wide receiver 1 in this offense, if he does go back to getting 8 targets per game, say, then we could see a run like we saw at the end of last year that was winning people leagues.
And this defense stinks. So they're going to be in some big time heavy passing game scripts. They got matchups with the Panthers, the Browns in Week 13. Then they go on bye in Week 14. They're a late bye team, but then they come back and play Titans, Colts, Bears in the fantasy playoffs. So there's definitely some spots there for a man coverage winner like Ricky Pearsall. I think Juwan Jennings will be solid too. I just think all the pieces of this offense are going to give you some good weeks towards the rest of the season just because of the environment, everything we're seeing here. So definitely frustrating return from Ricky Pearsall, but I think it's going to be much better on Monday night. Your last player here, 5th and final guy. We finally got some proof that he still exists on planet Earth this week. That is Trey Benson, Cardinals running back.
Yeah, him and Bucky Irving. I have to Google search every single day because I can never find anything. So I was happy that Benson, there's some positive news now. Maybe he's coming back because 2 different things. 1, the volume potential, and then 2, the playoff schedule. The first 4 weeks with him and Connor, if you combine their expected fantasy points per game, I would give Benson, say, 75%, or if he got 75% of that workload, it would be the RB6 in volume. So really good volume in that backfield when you combine it. If you just give him the 3/4, which I would say is close to what he might get, and if it's not, then still RB1 level. So really good volume there. But then I was thinking with Brissett in there now, the running backs are a bunch of no names. Has the volume really been as good? If you combine all of the Arizona running backs right now, if you gave him 75% of that, it would be better. He would be the RB2 level volume with the current Arizona backfield if he got 75% of the work, which I would expect it to be, again, somewhat around that. But if it's not, then you're still expecting that RB1 level volume. And he was a guy that was efficient. He was number 2 in yards after contact per attempt this year. So he was efficient, has a lot of volume potential, and an interesting playoff schedule too.
Yeah, the playoff schedule, he's got the Texans Week 15, but then Falcons Week 16, Bengals Week 17. Man, imagine that. Trey Benson, Week 17, Bengals defense. He's winning people fantasy titles, Joel. I can see it.
Totally. He's one of those interesting buys if you have the fantasy buy in the playoffs, you're one of those top 2 seeds. You don't really want to play him against the Texans. But after that, Atlanta and Cincinnati both bottom 5 against running backs right now.
And we've just seen with Jacoby Brissett in there just so much more play volume. They're number one in passing yards per game with Jacoby Brissett under center, which is an outrageous sentence to hear a human being say in the year 2025, but it is a true one. So Trey Benson, really like that. He's just been completely absent for so long. I think he's been a little out of sight, out of mind. So that's why you listen to this segment. That's why you check out Joel Smith's work, so that you can remember some of these guys that are getting some buzz building. Joel, appreciate you doing this as always. That is going to do it for us today. Thanks again to Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL, who's all in all season. And don't forget to check out Toyota's game day giveaways for your chance to win. Joel, what do you got working on right now that the people can check out?
Got some fantasy playoff defense and kicker stuff out. So YouTube video, a full breakdown of the defense schedule if you need to stash a couple, and then just released one on TikTok, Instagram, all that good stuff for kickers for fantasy playoffs.
Oh my God. Are the TikTok streets begging for, fantasy kicker takes? Is that where we're at this point?
For some reason. I always maybe I won't do a kicker video this year. And then for some reason, it's like one of the most viewed videos at the start of the season. I don't know why, but people need to know who's playing in the domes and who's playing in Buffalo at the end of the year.
Wow. Well, you know what, pal? You've cornered the market on that one. So shout out to you for being their guy. That is why people love you. That they're like, Joel Smith is my guy, because you're giving them the stuff that I couldn't possibly spend a single second thinking about that. So you're in the trenches. Joel's out there. If you need to know fantasy kickers, check out Joel on social media. He is going to be able to give you that stuff. TikTok, Instagram, as you mentioned, everything. So make sure you're following all of his work.